in on a deal with the Texans, if you're the Vikings, you have to get involved.
Just keep adding a first-round pick on top of the Bears' offer.
You can't allow. Can you imagine this division with Rodgers, who clearly is still damn good, and Deshaun Watson?
I want to be fair.
Reckless speculation.
Well, let's unpack that for a second here before we get to our Minnesota sports statements. When you saw the double down, we talked about the Deshaun Watson stuff last week. And by the way, our two most popular YouTube videos on Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily, maybe of the year, not counting Vikings Vent Line, were the Deshaun Watson trade speculation videos from last week. So thank you guys, and please subscribe to our SKOR North and Purple Daily YouTube channels. But now that you saw all the insiders over the weekend that mattered, and specifically Schefter and Mortensen double down on this notion of Deshaun Watson wanting to be traded, what were your thoughts about it? And do you think the Vikings actually make a phone call? I know what we would do. We would already have put together a trade offer. Do you think they actually make a phone call on this?
Not unless the Wilfs go to Spielman and say, make the phone call. I don't think Rick Spielman picks up the phone on his own accord and makes that phone call. If I'm the Wilfs, though, I would urge my general manager to know exactly what's going on and make that call just to see what's possible. But I think I believe he is going to be dealt. I think he is rightfully so not pleased. He has in Watson's case, no reason to lie about the fact that ownership came to him and said, we will involve you because you're our marquee player and we just signed you to a huge contract, right? And then I don't know why, because it strikes me as incredibly stupid, but instead of at least listening, they ignored him completely. I think he wants out, and I think that we saw in the case of Stephon Diggs that no matter how good the player is, if the player basically threatens to make the life of the team as miserable as possible, he's going to get his way. But no, if it's just up to Spielman, Phil, I don't believe that they make that call. Personally, you're right. I would.
God, I just think I get that it's complicated because you'd also have to find a way to move off of Kirk's contract.
Yep.
And I don't know that it's as simple as, all right, Houston, you got a disgruntled quarterback. We'll give you a couple first-round picks and something else, and we'll give you Kirk. I think they're going to want to know, and this is part of the reason why the Miami package makes more sense, because they're going to want to know, all right, well, if we're going to get rid of a star young quarterback and is emerging into his prime, and he's mobile and teammates seem to love him, we're going to want to know who our next quarterback development project is, right? They're not going to want a 32-year-old when they're trying to probably strip this thing down. J.J. Watt is past his prime.
And Tua, rookie contract.
So, you're probably not going to be, if you engage in these discussions, It wouldn't just be, we'll give you Kirk and a couple first-round picks, and then you give us Watson. You'd probably have to move Kirk separately altogether to, San Francisco or somewhere else, and that's a whole nother discussion. So I get that it's complicated, but my God, Vikings, go look at the things that are, go look at the teams that are, I sent this tweet out this morning, the teams that are advancing in the playoffs and the teams that are the best in the NFL right now. You either need a good young quarterback on a rookie contract, preferably one that's mobile, Josh Allen. We saw what he did over the weekend, or you need a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. And if you have something in between where you have a non-elite quarterback and you're paying him a lot of money, you're just stuck in no man's land. It's not a coincidence the Vikings are sitting here as a fringe playoff team or worse the last 3 years. Deshaun Watson changes that. And yes, I get it. He also makes a lot of money, and you're going to have to probably, find a way to skimp on a couple positions because he makes $30-40 million a year, depending on the year over the next 5 years. But I think it's a huge mistake if they don't get involved and at least have a conversation with Houston. If they decide, well, listen, Kirk had a good second half and he's under contract, it's just too complicated, and that is a failed job by the Vikings front office.
I think that they are going to do everything in their means to run this thing back as much as possible, which I believe is a mistake. But can you imagine Deshaun Watson running your offense with components like Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Irv Smith, Thielen, and the potential's there? And by the way, he can run too.
Yep.
So now you've got, pick your poison, Cook or Watson. Oh, but hold on a second. It's play action. and I'm throwing it to Justin bleeping Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. Think about the glorious nature of watching 6 football games in 2 days and like what works now and what doesn't work and what's exciting and what's fun. Incorporate Deshaun Watson into the Vikings offense and imagine the possibilities. Even Zim, I think, would change his view on how it needs to work.
Dude, like I am like stopping just short of getting on my hands and knees and crawling to the Vikings practice facility and begging Rick Spielman. And you know what? Also, George Payton, I know he's been interviewing for different jobs around. George, get back to the Vikings practice facility or get back on a Zoom. Just need one last thing from you here before you take your first job as a general manager. Swing this trade. Because what you just said, like the scenario you just painted offensively, and people are going to say, well, the Vikings offense was already pretty good this year. Well, they were 4th in yardage. They were 11th in points. So they were still outside the top 10 in points. They were 13th in Pro Football Focus rating. To me, the offense was very good, and the offense was certainly better than the defense. But they're still, with all the weapons that they have, and you could still draft an offensive lineman in the first round, but you're going to have to give up that pick to get Watson in this scenario. If you run it back next year and you get these defensive players back, Danielle Hunter comes back and Eric Kendricks is healthy for a season and Michael Pierce, right? Your defense is going to be back above average. I think worst case, like it's an above average defense next year. If you run it back with the same offense and a better defense, you're going to be good. You're going to go like 10-6. It's a tough schedule, but you're going to go like 10-6 and you're going to make the playoffs and you're going to be good. And you might even win a playoff game if you run it back and get the defense back with Kirk Cousins, etc. But if you run it back and you swap Kirk Cousins for Deshaun Watson, not only are you good, you are Super Bowl good in this NFC. With Drew Brees probably retiring, the Saints are going to take a step back.
Yep.
I mean, you are by the way, the Bears are going to go back into transition mode unless they're the team that gets Deshaun Watson.
Yep.
You are Super Bowl good if you run it back with a better, more dynamic quarterback in Deshaun Watson. Fix the problem that you've had
and think about
for
this.
decades here.
Think about the potential workload that you take off of Dalvin Cook if you have Watson. Like now you don't have to hand him the ball 1,000 times. It's different. It changes the dynamic completely. And that offense would be a nightmare for opposing defenses almost every week. An absolute nightmare. So do you think that they will make the call or no?
I honestly, like, I don't think they do. I think they might make like a perfunctory phone call. I'm sure these teams are like, we had Gerson Rosas, the Timberwolves GM on or president of basketball operations on our show, a few weeks ago. And like, he kind of gave us the inner workings of an NBA front office. And he said, I mean, we call and float trades all the time. Right. And we actually propose like 50% of the trades that we come up with on our own. We just float stuff. I don't know what the Vikings are like, but I'm sure it's like that in front offices where like the offseason hits and you're going to pick up the phone. But I think they really like what they were onto offensively last year. I think my guess is Clint Kubiak becomes the offensive coordinator. They try to keep things intact. And I think in this case, good is the enemy of great. I think they're very comfortable being good. And they think, boy, if we're just good again and maybe put a couple tweaks in there and maybe bring an offensive lineman in, good is the enemy of great. And they view giving up a couple first round picks and shaking things up by, bringing in an entirely new quarterback and maybe even a new system. They view that as like a colossal risk. And I view it, if the goal is Super Bowl, I view it as a risk to not take a shot for a quarterback like a Deshaun Watson. That's where I'm at. The other thing, too, people point out is, well, be careful what you wish for. The Texans with Deshaun Watson, now that he's highly paid, won 4 games last year. So, sure, he's great, but like clearly his contract, or maybe he's overrated in some way. They won only 4 games, and so his contract or him being overrated must be part of the problem. To which I say, the Vikings are a competent, pretty well-run franchise. Houston has become a dumpster fire. The Jets are a dumpster fire. The line, like, there's like 6 franchises right now, and unfortunately for Houston, they used to be fairly well respected. They've sort of fallen into the dumpster fire category. There's so many franchises like the Vikings, and I would even say like the Bears, that if they just got their franchise quarterback finally, they would be Super Bowl contenders because they can build a defense and they can build all kinds of like skill position players and weapons. And so I don't think you can say like, well, Deshaun Watson comes here and all of a sudden you're going to go 4-12. No, the Vikings are a more well put together franchise.
Yeah,
so I don't want to hear that one.
I think the problem is this. I think they'd have the potential of making the phone call internally, just from a GM coach standpoint, if the coach embraced offense and offensive philosophy and thought processes. But unfortunately, I think I can state pretty much as a fact that the coach is going to spend the entire spring and summer in his office trying to figure out how best to beat offenses with his defense. And so I don't believe that Mike and Rick would really sit down and have a conversation that meant anything about what if we did this? Like, Kirk's good. Let's all say that. But Deshaun Watson can be great. If they had an offensive-minded coach, which gets back to the point of why I think in 2021 you probably want one. If the conversation was, hold on a second here, holy cow, if we did this, we can do X, Y, and Z, and it's going to be fantastic. And that doesn't mean that the coach is ignoring defense, but when the emphasis is how can I stop Deshaun Watson, not how can I obtain him, I think there's a problem there.
Yeah. Boy, if the Bears get him, there's a chance the Bears would, like, if you're the Bears, if you're not attempting to give up a bunch of first-round picks for Deshaun Watson to fix this 50-year problem, then everyone should be fired anyways. So
that's quite possible.
He probably winds up in Miami, though, doesn't he? It's such an easy trade. They could send Tua back to Houston.
The biggest hope is that the Bears qualifying for the playoffs basically saved everybody, and Trubisky gets some type of like bridge deal. No. That's, if you are a Vikings fan, the one good thing about the Bears making the playoffs is a potential false sense of security.
Yeah, that would be hilarious as well.
It's possible.
Let's get to